or, "I'm sorry about the tree." One day in the hospital, Dory told him, "Tom, it's Christmas Day today. Merry Christmas, sweetheart." His eyes were closed, but he squeezed her hand. She said, "Do you remember Christmas, darling?" And he opened his eyes and looked up at her and shook his head. Yet the next day again, he wrote about the tree. He couldn't remember Christmas, but he knew a tree should, for some reason, be erected in his living room. Gradually, he could remember a bit more, and he could spell world backwards and count by sevens and all those things they'd asked him to do in the hospital when he was off the respirator and out of intensive care. But still, he had a strange, scattered memory. Like, for instance, he knew he absolutely must shave every morning, but he was unsure why. He reminded Dory to check the battery in the smoke detector, but when she said, "Oh, Tom, what's the worst that can happen if our battery is dead for a day or two?" he didn't have an answer. So he was caught in a bind where he was committed to doing what he'd always done, but he couldn't remember why he was doing it. His life, some might have said, had no purpose. Neither did Knute's, really. Summer Phelan was in a daycare that she hated, and Knute was working full-time as a hostess in a busy downtown restaurant where everybody was used to seating themselves. She wasn't aggressive enough to say, "Hey, can't you read the sign? It says, 'Wait to be seated.'" And so pretty much she just stood there all day smiling and feeling stupid. From time to time, she moved the sign right in front of the door, but people would walk into it and then move it back out of their way. Sometimes the waitresses got mad at her because she wasn't seating anybody in their sections, or because everybody was sitting in their section and they were run off their feet trying to keep up with the orders. Then, for a while, Knute would try to keep people from walking past her, and she'd say things like, "Please follow me," or "A table will be ready in a minute," or "How many of you are there?" Usually there would be 2, and when she asked how many of them there were, they'd look at each other like she was nuts. Then they'd hold up 2 fingers or point to one another and say, 1, 2, in a loud voice. 2, Knute would say. "Okay, 2, 2, you say," like she was trying to figure out how to seat 12. Then she'd meander around and around the restaurant with them behind her, suggesting possible tables, and she'd say, "Oh, no, I think, well, no, well, yes, okay, sure, right here is fine. Wherever you want, really, I guess." Her boss's wife and all the waitresses and the dishwasher and the 2 cooks kept telling him to fire her, but her boss kept giving her more chances. He told Knute she'd get the hang of it in a while. "Just get in their faces and make them wait. They're like pigs at the trough," he said. "You gotta keep them under control." On her first day, Knute had actually managed to lead an old couple to a table. But somehow they got their wires crossed, and Knute pulled a chair away from the table just as the man was going to sit on it. In slow motion, he fell to the ground while Knute and his wife stared, horrified. As he fell, he knocked over the fake flower arrangement, and the vase shattered. Knute's boss came running out and picked the old man up, cleaned up the glass, and told him lunch was on the house. Then he took Knute into the kitchen, made her a salami sandwich on a bagel, sat her down on a lettuce crate, and told her not to worry, not to worry. This was her first day, she'd work out the kinks. But she never did. Anyway, it was a lot better than pumping gas. The one time Knute tried that, she accidentally filled up a motorhome with gas. Not the gas tank, but the interior of the motorhome itself. She had stuck the nozzle into the water spout hole instead of the gas tank hole. The woman driving the van hadn't noticed until she lit up a cigarette and her motorhome exploded, partially, and her leg ended up needing plastic surgery. Her husband sued the gas station and won a bunch of money, of course. Knute was let go and told by her supervisor that she should get tested for brain damage. On her way home from the restaurant, Knute would pick up Summer Phelan and listen to her tell lies about the daycare. How Esther, one of the workers, had punched her 6 times in the face, how Justin, one of the twins, had made her put her tongue on the cold swing set and it had stuck, and they left her out there all alone all day, how a terrible man with purple skin and horse feet had come and killed 7 of the kids. "Summer Phelan," Knute would say, "I know how much you hate it, but for now you have to try and find something good about it. It can't be that bad." Knute was tired from standing around stupidly all day, but she felt she had to make it up to Summer Phelan, so for an hour or 2 before bedtime, the 2 of them would play in the park or get an ice cream, maybe rent a movie or walk to the library. And that wore Knute out even more. Her favorite days were when Summer Phelan would relax and they could just sit at their little table and talk. Summer Phelan would tell her funny stories and shake with excitement, and then, in the evening, they'd curl up together with Summer Phelan's soft head under Knute's chin. Knute would try not to fall asleep because that would mean that was it, the day. If she didn't fall asleep, she'd get up very quietly and make herself a cup of coffee and phone Dory, collect, or her buddy Marilyn, who just lived a couple of blocks away, but had a kid and so was housebound like her in the evenings. Sometimes Marilyn and Knute watched